you say your or my educational experiences. So for you, it sounds like, you spent time in schools, you've been a teacher, you now work at a self-directed learning center, but what was your formal education like? Like elementary, middle, high school, college? What kind of school did you attend? Were you unschooled? How did it work? And what kind of student were you?
So I went through traditional public school, and I was a very disengaged kid. I did my very minimum to get a B average. I looked out the window a lot. If I could leave during recess, I would. So I didn't realize there's a word for that now called elopers, but I just would leave and then somebody would find me and bring me back. But it was the late 70s, early 80s, so it wasn't that big a deal. Like, somebody would find me and I'd have a snake and, somebody would faint. But so I just did that. My mother was very much an unschooly person. She just didn't know it. So she would sometimes say to us, hey, do you guys want to go to school, or do you want to go to a museum and go to lunch? Or do you want to go to school, or do you want to drive around Amish country? Or do you want to go to school, or do you want to go this hike? And so what are we going to say? My brother and I were like, no, we do not want to go to school. We definitely want to go get lunch with you and go to a museum. And so we would go tour all these old buildings and things like that. It became a bit of a problem because we missed a lot of school. So then she'd say, just tell them you're sick, which, then that's not the greatest lesson either. So I kind of trucked along that way until I got into high school, and I got really into band and choir. So I was really into music, and I loved it. That's when I started loving school, is when I got to be in band and choir and the musical and things like that. And I decided I wanted to go into music for a career. So I went to music school, and music school is very specific. Getting a degree in clarinet performance, it's, all chamber music and orchestra rehearsals and private lessons, which is, everything I wanted. And this is, as an aside, one of the things we talk about in self-directed education is people think it's all a breeze and you don't have to do things you don't want to. But I had to do things I didn't want to. And we find that with our members too, because if there's something you really want to do, a lot of times you have to do something else to get there that you don't want to do. So I definitely had to take some math classes that I didn't want to take. So I did that, and then I got my master's degree in clarinet performance as well. One of the things that stayed with me really powerfully is that as a musician, I had a private teacher. And I met with him every week. I had the same teacher in high school, and then I had one in undergrad, and then I had one in graduate school. And he was more than my clarinet teacher. They were my mentors. So I could ask them for advice about life things in addition to clarinet things. And I didn't have any other teachers where I had a relationship like that. And that's one of the things that calls to me at Embark, is that mentoring aspect, to really get to know somebody and be a part of their life and help them reach their goals that they create themselves. And that's what my clarinet teachers were for me. And I still have a relationship with all of them, and I love them very much. So the other part of having a mentor is that self-directed education part, which is I had to find them. I had to find these teachers. I had to find ones that worked for me, and I did find ones that didn't work for me. So it's sort of that hero journey of a quest of finding this teacher that's going to be a big part of your life. I had to find my Yoda, and I found 3 Yodas, which was really a wonderful thing for me. So that's also a very important part of what led me into self-directed education too, which is finding that person and finding that person that works with you. And that mentor is a guide, and they taught me things, and they would say, you have to learn this clarinet book from beginning to end at the slowest tempo possible because it's going to help you have good foundation, but I know you're going to hate every minute of it. I had a choice at that moment, right? I could say, you know what, I hate this teacher and I don't want to do it. Or I could say, all right, I'm going to power through this because he knows what my goal is and where I want to go. And I respect him, and there's mutual respect on his side for me. So that also was a big part of it too. And then while I was in graduate school, I started working in public schools. So I worked in public schools in New York City. And then I lived in Florida, and I worked in public school and private schools there, and then New Jersey and Pennsylvania and Virginia. So I moved around a lot, and I was in a lot of different schools. And it was really those kids, like the student I told you before, where you see them, you just know them. And we all have them. We see them in the class. We know who they are. And those were the people that I thought, why? Why are we taking the square peg and trying to shove it into a round hole? We don't have to do this to this person. It felt inhumane to me. And that's when I thought I need to move on and find another way.
That's great. And I mean, I like how you describe your formal education it sort of answers the other question that I usually follow with is how do you use it? But, there are parts that you're not using, but there are parts of this that you are both direct. I mean, you still play clarinet and give clarinet lessons and do that, but that maybe the way that schooling occurred has informed your ideas about unschooling and self-directed education. I say this a lot, and it's one of the reasons I think that things go well in my classes. Try to treat everybody well. And I recognize, especially in an English class, not everyone wants to be there. I worked with a principal one time who had been, I think she was a chorus choir teacher, something like that. And I would get frustrated, and I was very young as a teacher, but I'd get very frustrated when she talked about, student motivation and how students responded to her. And I'm like, everybody wanted to be in that room. I'm teaching English. Like, they have to be here and they have to take this test. Like, so a big part of my job is sales is like, I first have to convince you to buy that this is worth buying and then buy it. And, but it goes better if you form a good relationship, and something that I think is important as more schools are pushing social emotional learning, which is important, but it's not something like that shouldn't necessarily be the top priority, because if the most important thing that the teacher's doing is trying to build a relationship with a kid, then you forgot, like, you're supposed to teach them something, and it doesn't mean that the relationship isn't there, but those should work side by side. And if you let something else pop in front of your curriculum or what you're supposed to be teaching, it gets weird. Like, you found these great mentors, not just for music but for your life, but it's because they were serious about what you were there for. Like, they understood your goals. And like, imagine how differently that goes if the person makes clarinet second place to just like helping you out and being your friend and giving good advice. Like, I don't want to speak for you, but I think a lot of people in that case, like, you backpedal from that person because it seems where like they come on too strong, and I don't know, what do you care? I'm just show me how to do this thing, teach me this thing. And so I think it's a very important balance. And I end up with a lot of people in my room. Like, I never have an empty classroom. And sometimes people are like, you have kids in the room who would never in another circumstance talk to each other or whatever else. And sometimes they ask later on, like, what's with that kid? What are they doing in here? I'm like, what's with you? Why are you in here? Well, I want to come hang out. I'm like, well, they want to come hang out. Like, you got to let people choose where they want to be, like, you can't be everything to everyone, but sometimes, say in that compulsory school setting, the kids will find you a lot of times if you make yourself available to it, and I think the mentorship piece is important there. Both, I mean, obviously in a musical setting, but some of my best classes had similar components. I had a college professor who canceled one class a week so you could have a one-on-one writing conference. And I improved my writing more in that one semester than in anything else I ever did. And also got to know her, and, all that was great. It's important, but I like I said, I think people have to find those places for themselves. Like, when you assign someone a mentor, like, good luck, And I mean, it's not that it was a bad idea. It's just that's probably not the most productive way in the long run to build those relationships.